So this is super fun. I'm so excited to be here with both of you to talk about all the behind the scenes ghosty stuff that happened during the narration of Little Voices. So I guess the first thing I should do is say who I'm with, right?
Yeah. Set the stage.
Or you guys can tell them who you're with as well.
Sure.
Okay.
So I am Scott Hathcock, and I am your husband.
Nice to meet you.
The prominent part of the book.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on this show today.
Yeah, I'm Nick Tantillo. I own Tantillo Productions, and I was fortunate enough to be hired out to do the audiobook recording for Little Voices. And I would say that to start things off, I believe in a lot of things, and one of those things is a higher power of some sort. Without saying too much about my beliefs, I believe in something, and I think that this book and this experience really recording with you further cemented that something to me. And so it was definitely, I've recorded hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of audiobooks, and some of the things that, even little things that would happen, are just so funny and unexpected. And you would always say that's just what happens around Kiersten. So thank you for having me. And I guess you didn't really have a choice because I was hired for you, but it worked out well.
No, but you would say to me that after we left that day, we were thrilled that you got Nick.
Yes. And I mean, honestly, I think, that higher power, that whatever that is, right? I think there was some divine orchestration here.
Absolutely.
Because this recording could have been a nightmare for me if I were with someone who, wasn't at least open to it. And I honestly just want to start out by saying I can't thank you enough, because you helped so much. And as you know, that first day I get here, and the recording booth, as they all are, is very tiny. So, that was hard for me, being claustrophobic.
And it could be tough for me too, because I do so many of these, and you want somebody to be as comfortable as possible when they're about to record for 32 hours with you and pour their heart onto not paper, but a microphone. And as a business owner, and as somebody that's trying to hold that person's heart and make them feel comfortable, the last thing you want to hear on day one, minute one is, I don't know if I can be in here. So I think at that point, it was just a leap of faith and trust for all of us. And I think, we tried a few different things to get you comfortable. And I think ultimately, once you had yourself in there and your little friends as well, I think that really helped you.
Well, you remember right when we walked in, I was like, oh, shit.
The look on your guys' faces was
how's this going to work, Kiersten?
Yeah. And my claustrophobia is pretty severe. And I know some of that comes from being an abuse survivor as a child. And that's pretty common. But honestly, you helped me feel so much more comfortable just from day one. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Well, you're very welcome.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough. I also need to thank Nate in spirit, because Nate is, he's one of the kids that I talk about in the book, and he was 13 when he passed away. And he opened the door for me. Literally opened the door for me, because he could tell I was freaking out. And I was really hot.
A little bit hot in there.
Yeah. So I guess I'll tell that story because it was kind of interesting. I didn't even put together, to be honest with you, that, when I first started channeling, I was reading. And I was reading when I was channeling Nate for the first time. I was reading Facebook. So it didn't even occur to me the first day when I stepped in here that as I was reading and narrating my own book, that spirit would come in.
Was it day one that had happened? Because I know there was a couple different occurrences throughout our recording.
Yes, it was. And the only reason I know that is because that's from the first section of the book.
Right.
So it was from the first part of what we read.
After 4 days, it all starts to blend.
Exactly. So, I made that connection today when I was thinking about coming in and doing this with you guys. Talking about it, is that, oh my gosh, that is exactly how I started channeling. And so as I started to read the section where I talk about Nate coming in and his dad wrote a letter to me, and I read that letter in the book, that's when he came in and I got a little bit emotional, because I could feel his emotion and his love for his father, for me, in this process. But I was also really still nervous and kind of claustrophobic. And I remember, Nick, you said, hey, there's a door that opened.
Well, no, it was a sound. Yeah. I mean, you were here with me, and it sounded like something like either was in the bathroom next door, just slammed the door, or like something had dropped. And granted, that door doesn't close necessarily all the way, but it's always stuck by the cords, keep it nice and the friction keeps it nice and shut. I've never had it open. And that sound was just kind of frightening. And you could see in the audio that you're just in the middle of the sentence. So for all those, I don't think they'd be here consuming this content if they didn't believe. Right. But for anybody who was trying to say that it wasn't real or it was staged or something, there's no way Kiersten could have been mid-acting, mid-talking, and just, kick the door open or something. It was truly, there's a curtain there too. And so it's
a very heavy curtain, I might add.
Yeah. And so it was just, I remember being like, are you okay? Like, what was that? And Scott and I looked at each other like, what was that? And you said, the door just opened. I think Nate might be here.
Yeah. And it was funny because there is that curtain there. But what I felt was a little bit of a breeze. That's what actually made me think, well, it's maybe the door. And that's why I looked behind me to see, oh my gosh, the door is open. So I started laughing because I instantly knew after doing this for, since 2010, right? I instantly knew it was Nate trying to help me out. And he's a prankster like that. And, I love that about him. And he comes in and passes messages to me quite a bit.
Well, no, I was just going to say, it was funny because on this end of the room where Nick and I were, up until that point, we kept looking at each other almost like, is she going to be okay? Is she going to be okay?
Yeah. We were actually,
The breathing was so labored, not when you were talking, but in between your lines, that I could tell he and I were like, I don't know, what's going to happen.
And again, and to interrupt, it was more because of out of our care for you, more than like the performance or anything.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so, but right after that happened, then you were fine. Like even the labored breathing stopped.
And every time you went in there after that, you'd be like, close the curtain, whatever.
And then it changed. Yeah.
And I think too, just hearing, you were such a big part of that as well, because you said, oh, wow. Okay. I mean, if this would have been someone that was not you, who didn't believe in any of this and was kind of giving me that, whatever, I don't believe any of this crap, then I probably still would have been very nervous. So I have to thank both of you and you too, Scott.
Oh, thanks.
Well, there's just to skip ahead a little bit. I know we're only 7 minutes in, but there's points in your book and every book that you get emotional, whether talking about loss of any kind, or, relationships. And when you come into a studio to record an audiobook, generally you don't, unless you're doing a sequel or something, you don't have prior knowledge of who that person is, what their energy is going to be like. And when you have to go talk about loss on a microphone when you probably have only read it in your head, that moment to share with somebody that you don't know as a stranger and just like let it out in front of them and then know that they might say, do that again, it wasn't good enough.
Right.
That's really scary. And so something that, and again, this isn't anything about me. I think this is more of a highlight of your perseverance in the whole recording of the book, more so than about me. So I appreciate the appreciation. But that being said, being with that stranger and having to go through that no matter what is really tough. So I always think about that on my end, is like, how can I put them in the best place to truly pour their heart out in a way that they feel is authentic? And I don't know that I have an answer for what it is that I do. I think that it's more just like who I am and how I was raised with like two loving parents, luckily.
Yeah. Well, we were laughing at the fact that maybe by day 3, you would be looking at me like, oh my God.
Well, you weren't here day 3, I don't think. So.
I know, I'm better saying like that. They're like, oh, what is this like to sit between this couple?
No kidding. I know. And, again, for those of you, I think, we're offering this as an extra, right? So obviously the Audible book is amazing. But for those of you who haven't read the book or don't know much about it yet, I was a skeptic before I started channeling out of the blue at 36. And so it's a very vulnerable feeling to talk about this in general, because I'm an extremely scientific person. I have always been kind of pushed away from the woo-woo world. I don't mix in well, And so, so for you to be so open to it. But one of my favorite things, going back to Nate and the door opening, one of my favorite things that happened was the next morning when you told me what transpired, right?
I think you told me that you had just learned about the door thing, right? You didn't even know about that. Yes. So let's start there.
Thank you. Yes. So, what was really interesting about this is I've known Nate, I've been channeling for his family, and Denise and John for a very long time, 10 years now. And I know what he does for the most part. and how he shows his family he's still around. And he has some major energy behind him. He really does. And but one of the things I didn't understand was that he opens doors. And so I actually kind of posted about the experience. And of course, all of my people who on Facebook who, were really supportive, we just couldn't believe it. Like, oh my gosh, he opened a door. That's amazing. But he also, I posted it and I tagged his parents and I said, he was amazing. He helped me out today. He had my back. And Denise said in a comment, oh, he always opens our doors at home. And I didn't know that. Yeah. I had no idea. I knew he left coins for them. I knew, he does a lot of other things, but I didn't realize that. So it was pretty cool to understand that.
Yeah. So after. Then the next day or whenever it was, I had told the story a few times. I'm so in on this book. I've had such an enjoyable time recording. I record a lot of different genres of books, and I was just fascinated the whole time. I generally like tune out, and then Scott can see me. I'm kind of just, and we're staring at PDFs in here, looking at breaths, and at times we just kind of forget about the content, but not really once did I stop actually listening to what you were saying. So that was really enjoyable. But so I was talking about it a lot. My girlfriend at one point said, like, you must really like this book because you just keep coming home and talking about it. So how could you record for 10 hours and then just want to keep talking about it? But that's what Little Voices sort of experience was for me. And so we were at a birthday get together one night after filming, Sarah and I, and we were sitting there and we were at a bar. There was no bartender there at the time. It was just us, me and my girlfriend and her friend. And we're sitting there and I just start telling them about the story about Nate. The weirdest thing, like the cooler door where you'd get beers out of for the bartender. I'm telling him, I say, yeah, and like the door opened in the studio, and right then, and I wish I had a camera. I almost want to call the bar and be like, would you have a camera from that night, like so I can like see their faces? Because you could tell they're like, okay, my girlfriend's into that stuff, but you could tell they're like, all right, whatever. And then literally the cooler door, just a little boop, like a 20-degree angle. They both just stopped and looked right. It was directly when I was talking about, directly when I was saying, he opened the door and literally boop, closed. And it was just it was the cooler door. And they were talking about it on vacation that they went on the next week. So it was unexplainable. I took a photo of the door. I showed Scott and Kiersten the next day. I was like, does this look weird? Can you see anything that I can't see in this? And I don't think that's it. From what I understand from you guys, I think it's just maybe you can talk about why, because I asked Kiersten, I said, is he like following me?
Right.
And she's like, no, not really.
No, it's a valid question, and this stuff, I've just learned all of this over the years, as it's happening to me. But from what I understand, similarly to how it happened to me in the booth, when I'm talking and thinking about them, it's kind of like an energetic call. So that's exactly what you were doing. And he is such a prankster. And I know he got a big kick out of doing that. But also I think it, instead of it just being a kick out of doing that, it was also meaningful for him because he's, sharing again, I'm still here. I'm not gone. He's not here in his body, but he's still here in spirit. And I know that meant the world to him to be able to kind of demonstrate that again to you.
And to be being talked about, probably, and knowing that he's having influence in the very real life.
Yes.
When he's not. Here.
Yes.
So that's incredible.
Yeah, it really is incredible. Yeah, that was one of my favorite things for sure, that story.
So tell me about like when you're, you said you've been on microphones and things, but you've never been forced to just read for 32 hours. So at that point that you are hot, tired, and, you have me sort of say, kind of questioning you, like, are you done? Are you tired? Yeah. What is it that sort of helped you on a more technical level, at least, or maybe mindset level, get through that for maybe anybody listening, not only for voice acting, but, anything in life.
In general. Well, I think, just being comfortable, first of all, that was huge. So, you put me at ease very quickly. But also, I really wanted it to be a great audiobook. I love audiobooks. I listen to them all the time, or, when I'm doing different things. And I wanted to, convey my story. So it's not even like I wrote a story about someone else and I'm just narrating it. It's me. And I wanted it to be as authentic as it is, as I've written it. And so, part of me is a perfectionist, and I also just kept going, knowing that I needed to keep striving to push through. I am also very stubborn. So I know you mentioned that sometimes audiobook narrators, decide, or the authors decide, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, we have to get to page, 105.
Yeah,
That's
you
where
never
we're
really,
going.
said no to a fix. If it was, if I said, why would you do it? You say, why are we fixing this? I said, because I knew you could do it better.
Yeah.
And you have some people that say, well, I did it the way I wanted, and that's great. But you were very open to, receptive to criticism and whatnot. And that's the thing I take pride on is like, I'm a 26-year-old guy, right? And so I work with people of all ages.
Were you about to say old people like you guys? Were you about to say
well, no, I mean, I recorded an audiobook for an 84-year-old Disney animator that like shook Disney up. And it is just crazy. But I was sitting there thinking, I'm telling this man who has been in the room with Walt Disney that wasn't good enough. But the thing is, you have to in life be honest with people, especially, whether it be business or life or relationship, I'm not going to get this to you tonight. I'll get it to you when I can, rather than just not saying anything and waking up and getting that question mark text, right? And people always, more often than not, I know this is, I'm sure you guys have experienced this years and years over and over, but it's like they always say, oh, thanks, I appreciate like the heads up, whatever it is. And so I think, I don't remember where I was going with that, but
I've got a question. No, not a question, but a reminder. You had never read your audiobook before, but all of a sudden you came up with this tactic to read an audiobook. What was it?
So I found out a couple things about myself while reading this book. I've always suspected that I had a little bit of dyslexia, but it became very, very apparent during this. So I tend to, when I'm nervous, I wanted to read ahead. I wanted to get through it faster. And the only thing that helped me was holding my hands like in a very clenched fist manner, but also tucking my thumbs inside for like 8 hours. So I'm just holding on as tight as I could hold on because it helped me slow down to read every single word.
You have carpal tunnel too.
I was not doing myself any favors. Right. And I know we talked about it
for
afterwards.
For what it's worth, I said my business insurance isn't good enough, so like she better stop doing that.
I know. I was like, well, maybe the next time I read a book, I'm going to get a stress ball or something.
You should get those to the studio.
On.
That would be a great idea.
You know what? And it's interesting when I mentioned it because I felt kind of stupid saying like, oh my God, I have to hold on to my hands really tight. But you said I said
gesticulations. Right? Yeah, so they're called gesticulations. Tell everybody like when I get the mic stand in front of them, I say, okay, I want you to be comfortable because like I need you to move. So when you're voice acting, you got to move. And if you don't move and use your hands to animate your speech, it becomes a lot tougher. I don't know why. It just is that way. I bet there's science behind it.
I think there is too. Yeah, and I was definitely gesticulating, but I said that word really well.
Gesticulating,
yeah. Don't say World War II.
I'm not going to say World War II. I just did it.
Similarly.
Was that the other one that was so hard? Oh my gosh, that was so hard. A couple words just got me. Yeah. But yeah, I was. I think it also helped me not hit the mic, with my hands accidentally. I was gesticulating, but I was also kind of keeping it kind of close to me. So, but yeah, no, that's great. I totally forgot about that.
So Scott, I'm curious to know for you, you were there for a lot of the recording, which it's interesting. I was telling Sarah, a lot of times, I have producers and calls on most of the books and I have people sit in the studio with me. It's not a big deal, but oftentimes, even though it's not a big deal and I'm a good person and I like, people, it's kind of easier to be alone in the studio and not feel that like energy of somebody just right next to you. I felt like very connected to you in a way. I felt like very comfortable and calm having you here. I actually felt like you were adding to the experience and actually starting to catch a few like things like you said A instead of an or the instead of there or whatever it was. And besides the technicalities, I thought it was very comforting and nice to have you here. So that was a positive for me.
A negative is say something nice.
A negative maybe for you actually. So that being said, you were in here, so I'm setting the stage for Scott was here and being a part of the process, which was awesome. But you had to take a step out for a few of the chapters, and I know you've read the book and now I've heard the book, so we don't need to sugarcoat it. I think we've all know what you guys have been through, and now the world's gonna know. So that being said, what part of you, like, that's got to be hard to read on its own, but is hearing it harder?
I don't know. I didn't hear it.
I know. So
No. I know what you're saying. And I think the anxiety, similar to when I read the book, the anxiety came as I got into those chapters where I was not present, and there was somebody else in my spot. And so, but again, I powered through it. And then I was like, oh, wait, okay, that's not bad. I can, and I know how it ends.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely love reading the book. And I kind of felt the same way about the audio, right? And at the same time, I meant, Kiersten's got to be present in the way she's thinking at the time she's, she's reading in the book. It's in the past, but she also has to be present at that moment and feel that emotion. So the listener can't be like, oh yeah, here comes Schmuck, or whatever.
Yeah.
And they have to feel like, oh, here
yeah.
comes a knight in shining armor. And so do I need to hear it? I'll probably listen to it one time just because I was a part of the experience and I want to hear what the finished quality and the gift is that you're giving. But it's always going to be tough to live through that again. And
it was hard to get me, get myself to get into that space. You were just talking about, I was really grateful that you actually did leave for that one day.
It would have been weirder for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's just like things like you say you're not there, you're not present for that part of the book, but you're on every page in that part of the book.
Yeah.
So it's like you are present, you're present, but from a different perspective. And I think for you, that would have been a little bit hard to like do these quotes where it's like baby or something. And it's like, you're right there, it's like.
Well, it was really, really difficult. And I remember waking up that morning and being relieved that you weren't going to be here and thankful because I didn't want you to have to hear all of that. But I also knew I had to get in that headspace, right? I had to be in the present. So one of the things you mentioned, you asked me earlier, what did you do to kind of prepare and get through it? So our daughter, Grace, is an amazing musician and singer-songwriter, and she wrote a song inspired by the book, and it's called Reconciliation, and a little plug for her. It comes out on September 16th. That's the mama in me, right? But it is stunning. It's gorgeous. It's heartbreaking. It's about the cycle of abuse. So if you've been in an abusive relationship, you will absolutely identify with it. It will resonate with you. And so my brainiac idea was twofold. I thought, okay, on the ride over to the studio for 30 minutes, I'm just going to keep replaying that song because it put me back in that moment of being in an abusive relationship and not understanding why I was addicted to the ups and downs. And also I sang with it. So then it warmed my voice up. Because I remember I came in that day and you said, oh, your voice sounds great. You already sound warmed up. I was like, I've been singing the whole time. Thank you.
A lot of raspy voice in the morning.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate that. And I remember thinking when we got to that part, because I know you, Nick, did not know about, you were going along with the book as we were doing it.
I knew nothing about, I didn't even know anything about Danica Patrick when I filmed her, I'm just kidding. I thought that was a joke. But I swear, like I go into these things with people famous or not, and I treat them all the same. To me, it's almost like I enjoy going on that ride with you as a brand new stranger. People always come into the podcast studio and not audiobook, but podcast. And, they'll say, did you do your like homework on me? I'm like, no, that's what the host of the show is here for. I'm just recording, I'm here to experience this with you. So, no, I thought it was, I had no idea. And you kept saying, you're like, oh, it's, you're in for one. It's about to get crazy. And I was like, how crazy could it get? And it got
right. Like she's talking about murders and, kids in spirit, and it gets crazier.
Well, that's what I said to you. I think that was the third day when you were gone. We were in one of our breaks and I was like, man, this is like blowing my mind because the first part of the book set me up thinking that like this was just going to be about spirits and voices and like and I was just ready for medium talk for, the whole thing. And then halfway through, day 3, I was thinking to myself, like, is this the same book? Like, but it's interesting because of the way that the little voices helped you get through that piece of your life, you couldn't have done it without setting it up that much up front,
right?
In a way, like
exactly.
And to your credit, Kiersten, that's why some of the initial publishers turned her down because they were like, I don't know how to sell this.
Yeah, right. Both things.
But and it's like we can't take this part out because then it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But then you also got, who was it that said that highest compliment to you?
She was
in the
actually
education world. That's all I remember.
Oh, yes. So there were a couple, but there was her name is Hannah. She's amazing. She's an Instagram influencer, and she's a former teacher, and she's got 2 little kids at home. And I actually met her because my furniture company is actually run out of Colorado, and they were giving away a toy box that I designed, and she got that toy box. So she started to follow me, and she saw that I had a book coming out. She said, "This is incredible. I would love to read it." So I said, "Well, I'll give you a copy." So she read it, and she just kept saying, like, "I can't believe this. This is insane." It's like one part, mystery, one part spirit stuff.
Suspense.
Like it all kind of rolled in together.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes together at the end where you really see that every single piece was needed, like you mentioned too, So I struggled with that, and I struggled with, well, do I need, after the 44th rejection, so if you're any authors out there, keep going, because I received 44 rejections, and then I finally got a book deal.
That's crazy.
Immediately. Right after the editor read the proposal, said, "I want this book." Yeah, so pretty crazy.
Yeah. But if I could say the underlying current, though, it's at the end of the day, it's a love story.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is.
Well, because the voices, you love them too.
Yes, exactly. And I think, that was the reason I wrote the book, is I wanted to, as an abuse survivor and a childhood abuse survivor who repressed memories of all of that, until I was an adult, I wanted to help abuse survivors connect the dots between using your intuition and escaping and healing from abuse, because they're very connected. Every single abuse survivor I've ever talked to has said, I knew it in the beginning. Relationship abuse, interpersonal violence, domestic violence. I knew when I met him, or I knew when I met her. It just, something felt off, and I didn't listen. I'm like, well, that's your intuition. Yeah. And I did the same thing. So that was, that was really when I went into writing the book, that was the focus. However, what was so beautiful, like Scott just said, is that I got to the end of it. I'm like, this is the love story. And, the man that we're talking about, who I was in a relationship with 3 years, who ended up being, unbeknownst to me at the time, was a predator, and an abusive one. But he used to tell me that he loved me TNF, meaning then, now, and forever. And I did find out later that he told a lot of women that, which is part of that predator side. Right. But, at the end of the book, I said, it was not him. That TNF was not him. TNF is Scott and me. That was what was so beautiful about this, through everything that we went through, and through the separation and all the hardship in their first 18 years of marriage, to be able to come back together and have the love still be there throughout it all, but then have an even stronger marriage. I just love that. It's such a gift.
Oh, I love you too.
Mic drop.
I want to talk about the fact that every time, so it was kind of funny, the other thing I got to see on this side was Nick would whisper to me. He would look up. He'd say, "I've got chills."
Yes,
and this was like early on. It was early on. Yeah. But the more,
Because sometimes people don't believe you. They're like, "You're just saying that." No, I'm like showing you. I have chills.
Yeah. So that's all he would do. Would just raise his arms.
I loved that too, because there were a few parts that I remember that you said, "I have chills," and there was a part where I talk about a miscarriage.
That was before. Also, I think I knew about the right side of your body chills thing. So I think like that was probably hitting home for you a little bit too, because like that's another indicator for you or whatever.
Absolutely.
And so that was just like random for
me. It was actually pretty cool for me to hear that from you, because for the most part, it's mostly women who have told me when they read that section they have chills. So it was cool to hear that, because I'm talking about a very personal thing like miscarriage, and so thank you for sharing that with me.
And sometimes he would say that, and then you would say, "Oh, hi, Big Daddy," and then you would acknowledge that Spirit was in the booth with you, and so the timing of all that was kind of interesting for me to watch as well.
Exactly, and that's what happened when the sound came out of nowhere.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that.
We have not talked about that yet.
We could play it now.
Okay, let's do it. Let's play it. The kids saw us caring for one another the way you do when you've been best friends for 18 years. Okay. What's that? No? Yeah, so that was pretty incredible. And I remember you saying, did you do something?
So that sound I asked her if she had done something. So the sound you just heard, and I'll play it again right now. So that sound generally only happens when some sort of electrical connection is pulled out of the audio interface, or maybe like something digital like happens that I mess with while I have the mic plugged in. There's this thing called phantom power, which is kind of funny that it's called phantom power, but
It is.
if you turn it on, like sometimes it'll create like a blip of some sort. Those things are to be expected. Very similar to the door opening. There was just this humongous, maybe we could get you to post on Instagram if you haven't already.
Yeah.
There's a big old blip, and you'll see it if you go to, what's your Instagram?
It's Kiersten Hathcock.
Okay, perfect. So if you go over there, you'll see the blip, and you would really only get this if you like straight up pulled the cable out of the mic or like something I just explained. And so I asked her, I was like, what did you just do? And she said, I don't know, I'm just reading. And so as you can hear in that sample, she's mid-sentence, mid-acting, like mid just going for it when that sound happens. And so it was just one of those where like I've recorded, at this point, probably hundreds of thousands of hours of audio. And, I've seen some things like that, but it's always like, oh yeah, I stepped on the mic or I stepped on the cable. And this was just like,
yeah, it was nothing.
Random.
Yeah. And it wasn't nothing. I mean, I say it's nothing, but it wasn't nothing, because at that point I do remember it was a little boy. I was telling the story of a little boy named Evan, and he came to me and he wanted me to pass a message to his mom. And he was basically telling me that he was showing me a pink room with pink drapes and just basically all pink, right? So I relay the message to her, and she said, gosh, that doesn't ring a bell. I don't recognize that room at all. Because a lot of times we have a tendency to look back, right? And we say, oh, well, I've never seen a room like that in my life. And I said, well, just hold on to it, because sometimes these messages will make sense later. And as a medium, you kind of go, well, maybe I was off on that, or maybe I wasn't. Well, 6 months later, and this is the story I was telling when this sound was made. 6 months later, she wrote to me and said, Kiersten, you're not going to believe this, but I'm pregnant with a little girl. And I do not believe she thought she could get pregnant. And so the pink, all of that was, symbolic of the little girl coming, and he was trying to tell her that. And so I would just
to me again.
Chills.
Yeah, you got chills. I love it. I know it's funny that you said that, because right as we were starting to talk about this, I felt him come on my left side.
Aww.
So yeah, he's here. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful soul. And I remember after the sound happened, you were the one, which was pretty cool, because I think we had been recording for 3 days, I think, at that point, and you said, was that Evan?
Yeah. Well, at this point, like...
Right? You're like, getting it.
I mean, geez, at this point, I was going home and I'd be like doing the dishes. It'd be like, Sarah, I intuitively feel you looking at me. I can't tell you the amount of times I said the word intuitively.
I know, isn't it funny?
I just found myself like talking to friends like, I intuitively knew that. And I was like, I've never said that word before. So.
Well, and the other funny thing that when our friends would ask Kiersten about, well, what was that like? You described it as the old game show, This Is Your Life.
My gosh,
The audiobook or the...
doing the audiobook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, recording
and you're
it.
like, it's kind of like This Is Your Life. Talk about that. Yeah.
It was. So that was the thing, I mentioned before, like I just was shocked. Like I didn't put it together even myself that all of these folks were going to come in.
Oh,
and they did. And that's what happened, because again, I'm reading, which is one of the, first ways that I started to channel was through reading. But also because they are such a huge part of this book, and they know what the bigger picture is. They know how it's going to help people. Again, that was really my mission, was to put the story out that way. But there were a couple really tough times because there are a couple kids in spirit who helped save me from that predator we talked about. And basically they had either endured sexual abuse as children, or they died at the hands of a predator.
Yeah.
And they came in, and that was the moment when I was like, I gotta stop. I'm so sorry. And I just started crying because I could feel them kind of hugging me, kind of propping me up. And at the very end, when I went to thank them specifically,
that's when you struggled the most,
holy
probably.
Cow, yeah. And I was just covered in chills from head to toe. It was as if all of them crowded into the booth with me. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I'm just super grateful for all of them. Oh,
well, we gotta let that breathe for a second.
Yeah.
I can't ask you about getting you in there to do the fixes right after, because I was like, all right, now unfortunately you have to fix all of these parts you cried on. So no, it was really good. With the last 25 minutes here, I want to before I forget, take a step back a little bit. I think it's easy to forget in your story, which is hilarious that it's an easy thing to forget that you were on Shark Tank, right?
Oh yeah, that.
And I think again, kind of the same thing. Like at the beginning of the book, and then as it progresses, you almost think this is going to be a Shark Tank entrepreneurship, voices book, and then all of a sudden it's a love story, and then it's but that Shark Tank seemed to always play back into either why, whether the reason you met that person or the colleagues or, there's always seemed to be kind of a drawback to it in a way, but it's interesting that such a, to most people, large, massive part of your life could almost be one of, I'm not saying it's a small part of your life. I'm sure you're very proud of it, but now at this point, after all you've gone through, I almost think that miracle, getting accepted and making it through production and all that, is not even close to the miracle that you and Scott and your kids have endured. So
Absolutely.
It's like, that makes sense.
No, we talk about it all the time. That's not her label anymore, right?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
you escaped that.
Yeah, it's not. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest with you, I struggled with coming out as a medium, right? Because it is easier to be the woman who won a deal on Shark Tank and who built a furniture company out of our garage than it is to talk about talking to those who are on the other side and working on cold cases and, all that. So I feel the same way, honestly. Like, I'm so grateful for Shark Tank, and I'm really grateful I went through that. I learned a lot about my own intuition during that time period. It was 2010. Yes, I filmed in 2010, and it was right as I was starting to channel.
I was like going into high school.
Well, honey, back in 2010.
That was
I feel really old. I was 36. It was,
that's
that
so
time
young
period.
too. I mean, before you continue on, I'll say, Sarah, because she was listening. I was reviewing your book, getting it exported, and in the book at one point, I think you said, this would be you reading the book, so people have to understand. You're like, I can't believe I'm only 39 or something, I think you said in the book. And Sarah looks, and she's 36, and she goes, this all happened to her by the time she was 39? Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, this woman's been through a lot by 39. And I don't know how old you are, but I'd imagine you at that point have been through a lot too.
Right now. Yes.
Yeah, we're not going to do that on camera.
No, I'm 51.
Yeah, so.
It was, I agree. I mean, I honestly, it was a lot. It was a lot of stuff that happened in a very short amount of time. And it was all wrapped around Shark Tank. And I was, I think I talked about this in the book. When I went on to do a TEDx talk in 2018, I met a woman on Shark Tank through Shark Tank who happened to have been on Shark Tank years ago. And we became fast friends, and she escaped, finally got out of an abusive relationship and then passed away shortly after. And so you had talked about how Shark Tank kept coming back in some way, but I felt her when I was on the TEDx stage. She was there, helping me, have the strength. And, but, even aside from that, just from the production standpoint, I'm so grateful because I had to trust my own intuition. And I knew I wasn't being steered correctly. But it's really hard to stand up to people that, they know what they're doing, right? They're TV producers. So the smoother and the appeaser in me wanted to make them happy. And I did not make them happy because I stood up and said, I can't say this. I need to go home and rewrite everything. And they didn't like that initially, but it all worked out. So, yeah.
But you're talking about how much we'd been through as well. So, then you've got the couple stuff. And that's why in the book, I'm going to say that because you just said, and that's why in the book, I too talked about the fact that I felt like we had done so much. It wasn't always obviously sunshines and rainbows. There were adventures and there were casualties and all that other kind of stuff along the way. But I felt like we were coming out on the other side. And then to have this thing happen during that stage, and again, grateful for something to happen to help me as well realign.
I feel like you this changed you. Yeah, like almost like actually just losing her. Like from the perspective, honestly, that not to interrupt you, but from the perspective that it was written, you could blame her for this. So don't take this out on me. All right,
no, not at all.
But from the perspective it was written, it seemed that you had some growing up and responsibility taken to do.
Yes, and that's in the book.
And you took
That's the part I haven't read. I'm just kidding.
It sounds like you took that responsibility. Maybe your heart dropped into your feet, and you thought, you realized what you were left with. And, but I'm can a 26-year-old tell a 51-year-old that he's proud of him?
You can't. Thank you.
But I think that's awesome for me to look at as just being younger in my life and career. I always try to just own up to things and tell the truth and swallow that pill and get better. And I think so far it's working pretty decently. So that's awesome that you were able to do that.
Well, thank you, Nick. And Nick, it's not something I can do across all the categories of my life. Right. So I mean, it's funny. I tell Kiersten some of the times I wish I could have that same focus and like vision as to whatever determination as to how I believe this is going to turn out, but not in an ego self, but just in a just in the sense of. I used to say all the time, I know how this is going to end, and I would say that to her,
and that would piss me off because I thought I was doing everything correctly, in my own mind, and
then I realized it pissed her off, and I stopped saying it,
which was really a good step. That was a good step forward. But the fact that you took it, I give you so much credit because not very many men would be so open and talk about it. I mean, you even wrote a beautiful blog post that I posted on my website that is included in the book. And you wrote that and you said, this is how I was able to come back together with her. I needed to fix some things. I needed to be a better father. I needed to be a better husband. A lot of weight was put on Kiersten, and there are not that many people that, in general, that would stand up and say that. So that takes a lot of courage and
especially when you have children that are at an age that they can comprehend.
Yes,
I think that's like a little bit. You guys are at a place where a lot of this is happening when your children definitely remember it.
Yeah.
And definitely are able to understand, for the most part, what's going on. So that takes even more courage. Yeah. Because not only are you trying to prove yourself, or not prove yourself, but, whatever it is to that one person, but you also have these offspring of yours that look up to you every morning. So I can't imagine.
You talk about that in the book too. There was a whole scene where you're talking about the night I wasn't there. I think I was traveling on business, and the kids just unloaded on you.
Yes,
and you,
as they should have.
I think you had that same thing in your head that I had in my head, and that is, what? It's not. I'm just going to sort of let them have this. They need to have this conversation. This is healing for them to have this conversation, and for you to not take it personally.
And also for you to know how they feel.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think I will always regret, even though I can see the master plan. I see how it all fits together. I know I couldn't have avoided him.
You never want to cause pain to anybody.
Right. And these are my babies, and so that was super hard for me, and that still breaks my heart that I was the one who caused that. But I also knew enough to know that the way forward was to listen with love. And I remember Grace being really mad. And our kids are just incredible human beings. I just can't say enough about them, both Natalie and Grace. But I remember Grace saying, I just wish you never would have brought him into our life. He was such an, bleep expletive. And I said, I know, I'm so sorry. If I could do anything to erase that time and not have him come into our world, I would give anything for that. And so I took responsibility for what I did, and I also understood that this was going to help them move forward and kind of let go of some of that pain that they were storing inside of their own bodies and souls. Yeah.
It's powerful.
Beautiful. Yeah, it is powerful.
I'd say in the next 10 to 15 minutes as we wrap up here, I think one of the coolest parts, just focusing on the love now, the sort of ending of the story, is that at some point you had to get rid of your rings. This is a companion podcast, so spoiler alert. But I think it was just so cool that now you have these rings. Maybe you guys can tell a little bit of the story that symbolize potentially more than these expensive rings used to symbolize. And to me, that was one of the closing, just so happy moments for me of I think about my own life and one day everything that could happen, and it's just, I want that, not saying that I'm going to buy a girl a $10 ring, but I just think what you guys went through was so genuine. So if you want to maybe touch on that.
Well, can I tell the first part just a little bit?
Yeah, I was going to say, you need to tell the story.
So how we got the rings, or the original rings, is what I want to talk. Is that all right?
Yeah. Go.
Okay. So, when we decided to get married, which is kind of a funny thing, and the story is in the book, so I won't go through the whole story. But at the end of the day, we end up at the same jewelry store in the same small town where not only my parents got their engagement rings, but my grandparents got their engagement rings.
And we were like 24, 22, and 24, I think, at the time.
So it's a really tiny town, Tallahassee, Alabama, and it was a family-owned little jewelry store in downtown. So the Sunday that we decided to do this, we're there, and then we wake up the next morning, we call into work playing hooky, and we both go to this jewelry store. And we say to them, and they know who I am, but not really. I mean, they know my family name because they've been there for years. We say to them, this is who we are, and she's excited, and she puts out the diamond rings, and she says, "Okay, here's what we have." And Kiersten and I are obviously looking at the price tags of all of them, and not in any kind of I haven't been saving jack squat for this moment. All those formulas you're being told that you have to do. No, that's not happening. But we pick out a ring, and we're very good actually with the cost. And then she says, "Now, how much do you want to pay per month?" And we're like, how $45? Seriously. Okay. Signs a thing. And so there's no credit check. There's no contract. There's nothing. We walk out with the ring, with the diamond ring. So how wonderful is that? So we did pay it off, by the way, a long time ago.
Where's the loophole here?
But then the engagement rings came from my aunt and uncle, right? And she was like a second mom to me, and she'd passed away when I was in college of cancer.
Or the wedding rings.
The wedding band, sorry.
Engagement ring.
And then you had a ring, and then you ended up using which ring? Of your grandmother's?
Yes.
No, that's later.
Yeah, I think
sorry,
that's...
I'm confusing the stories.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
So those were the
really
rings.
Likes the ring story.
He does like the rings.
No. So that was it. So there's a lot of history, and it had such a great story.
There's a lot of family tied into it.
So lucky to have that. And then fast forward to you're needing to have money.
Yes. Yeah. So when we first split up, we were struggling financially. So many people, especially through coronavirus, can't say that word. I'm not going to say it. COVID. People have lost jobs and whatnot. And so we were in that same position. It came earlier, and we needed to pay our house payment. And I was trying to desperately figure out what we were going to do. And I thought, well, we have these rings, and we're obviously splitting up. So there you go. And so I took some rings that my grandmother had given me as well before I got them after she passed away, and I had to go down and sell them in order to pay for that month. Because, the most important thing is keeping a roof over our heads and over our kids. But it was really emotional. Even though we were separating at that point, it was hard. It was hard to sell those rings, So
that was sad. Let's bring it up.
Yeah.
So
okay.
We go to Phoenix.
Yes.
You're on vacation though, right? Like just
finally
we having fun again.
Getting back together.
Yeah,
we were
and it was
just
a quick one night or two nighter. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, it was like honestly,
one of those where the music
night.
feels good again rather than like it's covering something up.
Yes. Yeah. And we were just getting back together. I had, escaped the abuse, and everything was kind of coming together. And so we decided to go down to Phoenix, and we booked ourselves at a hotel, and we had a great time. And you said you could kind of see the light coming back into my eyes again, and we just.
But I knew not to talk about the future. I did. The whole business about us getting back together was what in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we get back together, we get back together, but we're not getting back together to get back together.
Like, be present here.
It wasn't like with this project in mind of we have a deadline. So it all happened naturally. In fact, it happened so naturally that after that weekend, we're leaving the hotel and we're driving back to Flagstaff, and we pull over for lunch at P.F. Chang's. So this is when we need a lot of I guess, commercial sponsors because I'm about to throw out a lot of brand names right now. But we go to P.F. Chang's, and we're sitting there at this high-top bar table, and out of the blue, she says,
"Do you think we should get new rings, right? Like, let's go get new rings."
And so that's almost the way she said it. She's acting right now.
That's pretty good.
I was
about to say that was like
I know that was
she was
good.
on the spot right there.
I was really nervous to do that too.
And I, for a split second, said, in my head, I thought, no, this is not the way this is supposed to happen. Yeah, seriously, because I had this vision of how this ring thing was going to occur again.
Like how we were going to get back to,
and then this way it wasn't going to happen at
That's
P.F.
why
Chang's
it's so perfect.
off the I-17 highway, you know.
Super classy.
And so I just, of course, said, yes, let's do it. And so then we started looking at our phones. Well, where can we go get a ring right now? And we first went to the outlet mall. and then Kiersten was like, let's just go to Kohl's.
Yeah.
So we went to Kohl's.
We went to Kohl's. It was the best thing ever.
How much Kohl's cash did you have?
Yeah.
Zero.
For the... You didn't get like one of those discounts at the end?
Oh, I had maybe.
We did. I think we got like $25 off the next purchase. It was amazing.
They probably rolled their eyes when they saw what we were doing.
But it was so fun because now we have Kohl's rings. His is nicer than mine. I think we paid like $150 for his,
fine.
right? Yeah. And I have all these fake rings that it looks like I'm all blinging, but they're not. They're like $25 a piece. So I've got an engagement ring. I've got, like
you can switch them out when you want a different kind of diamond.
Yeah,
when the diamond, quote unquote, falls out, I just go get another one. I'm like, oh, let's see what they have on sale now. But that's what is so precious about it, is that, it was a symbol of our love. We didn't have to spend money on that we didn't have to begin with. Like, why would we do that? So I love these rings. Absolutely love them.
I'm just imagining in my head, you had so much like family value in the rings that you sold. And I'm just picturing one day one of your kids being like, oh, my mom passed this ring down to me. Yeah. They're like, it's $15, but I know how much it means.
But maybe,
seriously, I know.
You never know.
I kid.
But in 100 years from now, those rings could mean something. I mean, it could be worth something.
Yeah, that's true.
They're worth something now.
Oh,
they're worth your love. So.
They are. But that's pretty funny. I like that. That's hilarious.
I gotta crack a few jokes.
But no, that's it. That was the love. And so that was awesome to have that moment. But it did kind of take me back because, again, I think that anytime that you have ideas of your life, I tend to have these ideas, and sometimes I just need to appreciate that the product is happening, but the way it happened is not the way I anticipated, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so to just be open to the fact that, this is a gift and take it, and, maybe it was raining on the day you got married. So what? You got married.
So
whatever those visions are that you have, just let them go and just stay present in the moment and enjoy
and listen to your intuition.
Yeah.
Right? There you go.
Well, I can't imagine anything more.
Intuitively, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Intuitively, I know this podcast is going to come to an end.
Yes. Intuitively,
so let's
indeed.
Let Kiersten some final thoughts. Just, this has been, I feel like we've actually, without trying, this hour, we've pretty much covered almost everything about the book, like from not only things about the recording, but we just dove into your guys' life and your commentary and some of the different parts of your experiences. So I think this is going better than I could have ever imagined.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. And seriously, thank you for coming in and
you're welcome.
Doing this with us. This is pretty awesome. But, honestly, just to wrap it up, I'm really excited. I love when this kind of stuff happens. It happens naturally. It happens organically. I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful that Jared booked you. I'm hoping that you'll get lots more gigs.
Happy to meet you.
From Blackstone Audio. So I just think everything came together. And that's what's so cool because, this is the whole reason I wrote the book. I want people to understand there is more than we can see. And it's really difficult to put aside our science minds, right? Sometimes and just trust. But that's really what we have to do. This is Earth School. This is what we're here to do. We're learning to love ourselves. We're learning to love others. And we have a whole host of people on the other side that are helping us through all of it. Yeah.
I think that's it.
That's good with me.
Really good
job. Is that good with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We got 3 goods to go. So, all right. Thank you so much for having me. And
of course,
really pleasure to know you guys. And I'm sure that we'll know you for a very long time, I hope. So
me too.
And then hopefully
in the next life as well.
Yeah. and maybe one day we'll have Grace put out some crazy song and all of us can rejoice together. So.
Yes. I love that. And so just FYI, you're probably going to get a lot of medium bookings now, right? A lot of intuitive mediums are like,
be part of the spooky tour.
The studio's about to have a vibe.
Yeah, the Phoenix Scary Tour.
Exactly.
That's funny.